Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Owl omens and meaning. Recently, my aunt passed away from cancer at about 3:50 a.m. on a Monday morning. The night before, at around 10 p.m., while my mother, grandmother, and uncle, her husband, were at her house with her. My mother had her boyfriend, a Native American, brought them some food he left shortly after, but then came back inside and told my mother there were multiple owls outside hooting. My mother heard 3 of them. Later, the boyfriend said he heard at least 5. She asked my uncle if he had seen or heard owls in the area before he said no, and he had lived there for 20+ years. My mother's boyfriend said that owls come for change or transition, and also death, and possibly to help your departure and travel to what's next. He said my aunt was a strong fighter, and that's why so many owls came. She was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer and was given 6 months to live. She lived 5 years after they told her that, and never once felt sorry for herself or gave up. TLDR, owls possibly came while my aunt was dying. Does anyone else have any similar stories about owls or other animals acting like this?
So I just had a pretty strange event occur to me, /x/. It's not spooky by any means, but I thought it would be nice to share. Pardon my poor writing skills. English is not my native tongue. I left my house around 9 p.m. to return some films to a local artsy video rental store named Videodrome. I didn't quite feel like driving, so I decided to walk over with my dog, a Merle Great Dane named Fitzcarraldo. We arrived there pretty quickly, dropping off the films, and in a last-minute decision decided to leave with 2 more. The films mentioned were Fellini's Amarcord and Ozu's Tokyo Story. On my way out, what seemed to be an Argentinian couple started appreciating and petting my canine companion. Both parties seemed to enjoy it. En route back to my home, there is a rather large Catholic church facing a park. The lighting is quite dim and dramatic near the church, with ambient light gleams bouncing off the rustic bricks of this archaic structure. The park, however, is heavily illuminated by an overhead drapery of lampposts. I try not to linger too long in this area, as it's pretty seedy and has been the scene of at the very least 1 murder that I know about. On another occasion, I was harassed at gunpoint by some drugged-out, low-level petty criminals. I managed to get out of that situation unscathed, as I just took their verbal berating and threats and kept walking, staring at the ground. They threatened to kill my dog and then me. Fucking cowards. Anyway, I decided it was as good a moment as ever to smoke a cigarette. I sit on the steps climbing up to this church's tall, brooding wooden entrance doors, pull out a pack of cigarettes out of my pocket and light one up with a cheap orange lighter. I quit smoking on Sunday. So much for that. I take a couple of drags, stare down onto the park. I never really noticed these church steps offered an appreciable aspect of the city. Here is where things turn odd. A huge white owl flies into my field of vision through my left peripheral sight. It spread its wings wide and was flying right towards me and Fitz. I could see its ivory white belly clearly in contrast to its dark, glistening eyes piercing through me. The owl let out a loud shriek and changed direction abruptly and left to my right. It must have been 5 seconds when boom. What I thought to be an explosion or gunfire reverberated through the night sky, and every light went out for at least 5 blocks around me. I live in northern Mexico, so I immediately thought there was probably a narcotics-related shootout, so I picked up my pack of cigarettes and began running. I ran through a very dark alleyway and avoided being seen by passing cars. In a town notorious for the frequent kidnapping and ransom of people, I thought it better to remain cautious when wandering through dark city streets. I ran 6 blocks straight as fast as I could and was a few hundred meters from my house. Another loud shriek pierced the night above me like a fire in my ears. I direct my attention towards the starlit night sky and noticed the owl circling overhead. Could it be that this entity was following us? Stalking us? I've been watching Twin Peaks as of late, with which, if you're not familiar with, is basically a David Lynch series about murder and a strong plot relation to owls and their native superstitions with death, souls, evil entities, etc. What do you make of this? Mere coincidence? Supernatural?
You probably already know that owls are considered an omen of death by some people. Maybe you came close to death. Maybe you have spiritual guidance overlooking you who sent this owl to scare you out of the area which could have endangered you. Take it as you will.
I didn't know much, but I've been searching stuff on Google. I would like to think it's some good omen. I'm not superstitious, but I quite enjoyed this event as it broke the monotony of a Friday afternoon, destined to watch movies with my dog. Their eerie-sounding cries can send shivers up otherwise steadfast spines. The ancient Romans detested them because they were thought to be harbingers of death. The Greeks, on the other hand, considered them a good omen. An owl flying over a Greek army at the dawn of battle ensured victory. In England, though, it was believed that if a person looked into an owl's nest, he would suffer depression for the rest of his life. Curiously enough, I just found this. William F. Holt of San Angelo, Texas, told a WPA interviewer in the late 1930s, "At one time in my travels, I think it was in Mexico, I came to a village where the people were dying of a plague. The dead were left as they had died, and others who were able were leaving their sick and dead and fleeing. I stayed in an old church at night as the dark caught me there. As I lay on the floor, I could hear a peculiar ghostly noise somewhere in the building. The noise seemed to come from the belfry. I never believed in ghosts, but with the thought of those dead and dying people all around, I began to wonder if I hadn't been mistaken about ghosts. Finally, I got up courage enough to climb up into the belfry, and there sat a big owl. He looked at me with his big eyes as if to say, 'Man, do you see what I see?' At the first peep of light, I was gone from that place."
I had a childhood friend who was a native. He was bilingual, but his grandma hardly spoke a word at all. Back in December 1998, my neighbor and I got off the school bus. We were about 8 years old. We went to his place. It was just us. A few hours go by and my friend's grandma shows up. She started going on in her native language, and eventually I was told that she wanted to prepare my friend for his camping trip. The grandma was pretty nervous, but in a calm way, not jittery, just more aware of her surroundings or something. I'm kind of getting strange vibes from her, so I asked if she's worried about coyotes or wolves. She looked at me and said, "It would only look like a wolf to you." I didn't know she was referring to a skinwalker. She never gave it a name. She turned back to my friend and he translated a story from his grandmother. It happened when she was around 10 years old back in the 1910s. One night she goes out to a single-room cabin in the woods with her mom and grandma. They were staying overnight so they could meet up with her father the next day. They walked into the cabin around 6 p.m. as the sun was setting. She puts her bag down near a side window. As she does, a white owl catches her eye through the window. It instantly terrified her, but she didn't know why. Her mother noticed what she was looking at. The grandmother told the mom to not break eye contact with it, but to cover the child's eyes. The grandma then put a circle around their bed of some powder. Medicine men had a powder to keep these things back and to counter some kind of magic from these beings. She sat all night in her mom's arms. Her mom watched the owl all night. She heard strange noises all night. When morning came, the owl flew away. The grandmother drove on while her mom slept. She said that night the creature marked her. She then gave my friend a bag of powder. I don't know if he used it, but I would have.
I'm not sure if what I saw was a cryptid, a figment of my imagination, or some sort of Native American guardian or whatever. I don't do greens very often, but here it goes. Be me, 27. Live in decently rural southern Maine. The nearest town is 20 minutes away. About 4 months ago, it was the middle of winter. Dad is out for the day, brother is working, home alone. In my basement playing Vidya because winter break and I'm not working. Nature calls. Go upstairs to the bathroom. I should note that the window in our bathroom is not tinted and opens up to a foyer, which itself has a window, so I can see clearly out to our backyard. Anyways, sit down to do my business, scrolling through Facebook and shit. Look up outside just in time to see a snow owl swooping down from the sky and landing on a branch. Think to myself, that's pretty cool. Wait a second. Do a double take. The owl is huge, like huge. Wingspan is easily 10 feet across. The thing is probably as tall as a person, maybe taller. Branch it's sitting on is struggling to hold it up. Stare for a few long moments, wondering WTF I'm looking at. Thing is just leisurely preening itself and doing owl things. Start messing with my phone to try and take a picture. Look back up to see it staring right at me. Freeze for a moment. The thing flaps its wings and lifts off of the branch, flying toward the house. Hear a loud thump as it lands on the roof of the house. Shit bricks. Call my neighbor. Ask him if he can see the big-ass owl on the roof of our house. Says he doesn't see anything. Sit around for a moment, wondering if I should go outside. Decide to nut up and go outside. Sure enough, nothing there. Only evidence that it ever existed is the breaks on the frozen snow where it landed on the roof. Contemplate if I'm going schizo. Still have no clue what that was. Got tons of other stories, but not really cryptid-related, except one if people want to hear it.
Good story, man, and from what I'm hearing, that sounds like a thunderbird which natives have crazy history with. Apparently, the woman had to start strapping their kids to their backs while they were working outside, because the thunderbirds kept swooping them up. A lot of stories about these too, it seems. What else have you seen?
It was unmistakably a snow owl. It was almost hard to see because it was pure white like pick-related, and it had just snowed a shitload the day before. I read stuff about thunderbirds and knew it didn't really fit. Apparently owls are also an omen of death in some cultures, but there wasn't any death in my family or any of my neighbors. Personally, I always saw owls as a figure of knowledge, but what do I know? Second story. Be me, 20, visiting Grandma in Great Falls, Montana for Christmas. Grandma is loaded. The house is huge and sits across the street from a really nice golf course in a really nice part of town. Finished dinner, brother went to hang out in his room. Grandma went to bed early because old people. Sitting in the living room by the fireplace playing Pokemon Omega Ruby. Get up to get a drink. Look out the front windows of the golf course. See a deer by some of the trees eating grass. Is cool. Deer aren't really that common up here compared to the rest of the country. Open the door to go outside and look at it. When the door opens, its head snaps up and looks directly at me. Stands on its hind legs. Walks into the nearby trees taking huge strides as if it was on stilts. Not even scared, just baffled. Slowly walk back inside the house. Close curtains, go into the room. Play Vidya the rest of the night. Was always kind of spooked by the golf course after that.
Anyone know what the hell this was, bros? Pacific Northwest, by the way. Be me, 20, with bro, 18, and cuz 15, at our local beach. We arrived at dusk, 20 minutes to the bluff, the point of the bay. Dig a small pit to protect fire from the wind. They get music going in the meanwhile. Cannot get fire started. Dry kindling not catching, making smoke not fire. Literally dry grass and kindling from home is just smoking away, very sus. Cuz the local is always bissing us. He goes, if a stranger walks around the bluff right as the sun sets, it's a bad omen. This is relevant because we saw an owl in the woods earlier, which is allegedly a bad omen among the Native Americans. Fire still suffering for about 10 minutes. We all tried our hand. The sun finally sets. The Bluetooth speaker glitches and disconnects. A huge gust of wind sparks up, then kills my fire, shooting tons of embers up the beach. We all look towards the crest of the bluff about 20 yards up the beach. As the embers swirl in the air, a person in all black appears around the bluff. Embers die as they approach. Too dark to see face or make out details of what sort of clothing, but seemed like a woman. The odd thing is, she didn't have a flashlight or a dog despite walking the beach after dark. We all looked at each other in legit panic, cuz frantically saying, "Don't make eye contact, don't make eye contact." We all run up the sandy slope of the bluff to gather wood. Watch the stranger pass by. They, gender undeterminable, didn't even look at or appear to notice us. On God, as soon as they walked past camp, the fire sprang to life behind them and the speaker reconnected by itself. Pick-related, our fire. We didn't talk about bad omens again that night. We all caught each other watching the edge of the bluff through the darkness, just in case.
This incident occurred in Ozona, Texas in the summer of 2015. I had been on the phone with my ex-boyfriend, but I had fallen asleep. Then I suddenly woke up because I could hear my ex saying, "Baby, please, don't do this." I believed that I had broken up with him while I was sleep-talking to him. Anyway, he was telling me I was saying ugly things to him. in the middle of our conversation, I hear wings flapping and see a large shadow stop at my window. The first thing that runs through my mind is La Lechuza. I tell my ex not to hang up, but not to say anything. I'm scared, and I don't explain anything to him. Then all of a sudden, the shadow disappears. I then start telling my ex what happened, when from the ceiling of my room I hear this horrible laugh and scratching. Then I try to yell and nothing comes out. I am frozen and scared. I try to yell, I try to get up, but I can't. Somehow, I finally jump off my bed and run across to where my cousin and her daughters are asleep. I try to wake up my cousin, so I touch her and she opens her eyes. I said, "There's a Lechuza." But she didn't understand me. She said, "What?" Pretty loud. The girls woke up and right then it's right above my cousin's room. The girls start to cry. I'm starting to freak the heck out. We don't know what to do. My cousin and I decided to call the cops and tell them that we saw someone looking in the window. I mean, what would they think if we said, "We need an officer to rid us of this Lechuza"? Anyway, we call them and I swear the scratching, laughing and thuds are loud and getting louder. We wait and literally seconds before we see the spotlight from the cops outside, it stops. The cop arrives, but they soon leave. About 10 minutes after he leaves, it comes back. We run to the car and decide to leave.
Be American Indian, Anishinaabe, northern Minnesota. Grandfather and I are hunting in a woods after an October rain following real fresh deer tracks. Stalked nearly half a mile when suddenly we hear an owl hooting. Aw, shit. Now in Anishinaabe culture, owls are not inherently evil omens, but messengers from the Great Spirit, Gitchimanidu, and other spirits, but in some cases can transmit bad medicine, curse, onto folks when used in wicked ways by medicine men, shaman. Grandfather, being a traditional native, puts down tobacco and advises me to do the same. Continue our hunt. Suddenly, again, hear an owl, look up at a nearby tall pine tree and see it. Really large, blank stares. Mind you, this is during the day, early afternoon. Grandfather is staring back at it. Tell me to turn around and head back. Hike back to the vehicle. Nearing the trail we last parked and suddenly heard a grunting noise to the right in a small clearing by a pond. Very sick-looking and scrawny doe about 75 yards away. Grandfather, seeing this animal is suffering, decides to end its misery. Doe is broadside as well. Grandpa's a lifelong hunter, so easy kill. Shoots. Looks up shocked. That bullet went right through it! Deer just lifts its head up to look at us. Bolts another round. Click. Bolts another round. Same thing. Click. Confused as hell, the new rifle and ammo is right out of the box. Bolts last round. Fires. Missed. See dirt kick up behind the doe. Doe is just standing there, still facing us. Grandfather, with a look of understanding, quietly shoulders his rifle. Without a word, head back to the truck. Get inside, we make our way back home without really saying a word. After an hour's drive, we arrived back home. Hear an owl again. Grandfather says something in Anishinaabe. I recognize the words bad medicine and messenger. Loads the rifle again and goes towards where the owl was heard. Wants me to follow him. Near the edge of the yard when we hear some branches rustling. Near an old oak tree, we see this large owl again, blankly staring. Grandfather stops, aims and shoots. Puff of feathers and an extremely odd noise, almost like a man exclaiming pain. Hear it fall. Grandfather looks at me. Grandson, go grab it. He turns around and walks back towards the house. Do as he says. Stop in front of it. What the hell? It's an old owl carcass with a buckskin bag inside of it. Scared shitless, I still manage to pick it up. Walk back to the house and see Grandfather gathering wood and tinder for fire. Grandson, someone doesn't like me. After the fire is started and going well, toss the carcass in the fire. Burns extremely fast. Even the buckskin pouch is incinerated fast. Smells some really good sweet herbs when it's done. Grandfather exclaims we had bad luck today hunting because someone sent us a bad messenger, the owl, and ruined our hunting trip by offering us sick game, the doe. explains to me how usually medicine men use wicked teachings to mess with other people by cursing them. Sorry if it's a confusing story to follow. Ironically, being an American Indian, I am bad at storytelling.
It was Saturday night, and it was about 8:30 at night. I was with a group of friends. There were 5 of us all together, and just chilling out, hanging out, and walking around, doing nothing at all. We decided to stop at that convenience store across the street from the skate park and pick up some snacks and drinks. Me and 3 others were waiting outside by the bus stop for our friends to finish grabbing their stuff when we saw something moving in the trees behind us. We thought that it was just someone walking until we saw that it had red eyes. We laughed, thinking it was someone with a mask on, trying to prank us, until we saw that it must have been like 7 feet. We decided to walk over to the bushes and see if it was someone trying to pull a bad Halloween prank on us. We walked over, and that's when we started hearing a sound that sounded like a baby when they were crying. It was really high-pitched, but still sounded like a baby when they cried. As we got closer, it got louder and louder, till we were about 5 to 6 feet from it, when we saw it shoot up into the trees and into the air. We all jumped and screamed as this thing took off into the air, still staring at us, and was gone. We all ran back toward the store and told our other friends who had just come from inside. They told us to get off the drugs and that it was probably an owl or some kind of bird. We all walked over to the skating park and jumped the fence and went to hang out inside, sitting on the edge of the bowl talking and watching our friends skate around inside the bowl. We had been there for like an hour when we heard the same sound again, coming from behind us. We all heard it, and we turned to see the same red eyes up in the tree on the other side of the fence we had jumped to get in. We all sat there watching it for a few seconds when it flew back up into the air, and we were able to barely make out that it had wings and looked like a person. My friend Javier yelled out that it was a Lechuza, and we all freaked out. We watched as it flew over us twice and then flew off into the night. We all jumped the fence and walked home as fast as we could. The entire time we were walking home, we were completely freaked the hell out, and we heard the same sound 3 times, but it always seemed to be from above and behind us. We got home, and we all crashed at our friend's house and didn't leave till the morning. I'm not sure what we saw, but it really scared the hell out of me and all of my friends. I really don't care if you or anyone else doesn't believe us, but we all saw and heard the same thing, and we know what happened to us. We weren't high or drunk. We were just a group of friends just trying to get out and hang out on a Saturday night.
It was an afternoon in late May this year, 2021. I remember it was later in the afternoon, early evening, but it was a slightly overcast and gray day, so I can't tell you from memory if it was dusk or earlier. I live near a nature conservation area in the Central Florida area. My husband and I were very fortunate to find our property, ample acreage, heavily wooded to the point where we could not see our neighbors or any lights from their homes. We lovingly call our home the swamp. I was outside in our driveway, which is the only cleared space on our land, save for a natural circular clearing in our woods. I was walking back to our porch when for some reason I was compelled to turn and look back to the tree line, around 80 to 100 feet away from the house. I do want to note that there was not a single ounce of fear in me. In fact, I was quite calm when I made eye contact with it. At first, I didn't register what I was looking at. I knew it was an owl, which for my woods is not an uncommon sighting, but then it kind of shifted and I saw more of it. It was not just an owl. It was the head of an owl on what I can only describe as the shoulders of a human, and it looked like it was wearing a dark cloak, either made of dark foliage or feathers. It was tall, and from the trees around it, I guessed around 7 feet or so. It just looked at me, and I looked at it. I looked around and blinked, sincerely thinking it was a trick of the lighting, or my mind creating a thing where there was nothing. But no, when I looked back it was still there, calm and unmoving. I was still unafraid, which is not normal for me as I can freak myself out easily. For some reason, I felt another urge, this time to nod. I nodded towards it like I was showing my acknowledgement of it. It felt natural and right to do so, then turned and went inside my home. I did not go back outside that day, but the next morning I went back outside and stood in the same place on my porch to look at what it may have been, and there was nothing I could even remotely try to place as it. The space where it stood was between two trees at the opening to the forest line leading back to the small clearing. There were no low-hanging branches, no large leaves, no anything that I could trick myself into believing that was what I had actually seen. I have not seen it since then.
Around the year 2006, I was around 11 years old and in elementary school, located in East Berlin, Connecticut. Every recess, my two friends and I would venture past the playground into the field. We would stick around the edge of the field, along a fence that borders some woods and a pond. We were not allowed to go past the second light pole, so we would linger around that pole, talking, playing, and looking at the woods and pond. One day it was either late spring or summer because the canopy was green and the temperature was mild. We were walking out to the pole as usual. I was absorbed in the conversation, but before we got to the second pole, my friend said, "Oh, look at that bird." As I scanned the woods, my other friend spotted it before me and was saying something like, "Wow, it's huge." Finally, I noticed it, and it was huge. It was perched on a very thick sycamore tree limb, and its talons nearly wrapped completely around the limb's circumference. It was so big, in fact, that it looked like someone cut it out and pasted it on a background that was too small. I immediately looked for its eyes. This is the first thing I always do when I encounter an animal. Any bragging aside, I'm a very good animal whisperer, if you will, and initial eye contact is very important for me to connect with any animal. But I could not find this thing's eyes because they were evidently concealed by a face full of down or very fluffy small feathers. I assumed it was the molting season and it was losing its winter plumage because it seemed to be too large to be a baby bird of any kind. Its head was just like that of an owl's, rounded with an indented V on its forehead. I don't remember the exact colors, but it was mottled with typical bird of prey colors, not one solid color. I had only been looking at this bird for maybe 5 seconds when there was a loud snap and the limb it was resting on fell off the tree. I don't know if the bird had shifted its weight when we spotted it, or if this was just a coincidence. Well, when the limb came crashing down, all I saw was a blur as this bird struggled to stay airborne. I think one or both of my friends may have screamed, but I was just taking this all in. After that very brief blur of flapping, it flew, mostly glided, directly toward us. That's when my friends took off running, but I stayed watching it. I was not scared at all, just intrigued. I instinctively knew this bird was not in attack mode, but it was annoyed that we had disturbed it. But as my friends kept running, one of them was desperately calling out my name and the other was anxiously shrieking because I had not moved. And as I watched it fly toward me, its yellow talons were outstretched as if to pounce. It really looked as if it was not going to stop. So I pulled away from my instincts and ran toward my friends, looking over my shoulder as I did. I distinctly remember the chill in the air as its huge shadow fell upon me. But at the last second, it pulled its talons in and swerved back up over the tree line, and it was gone. Just like that. Now, while I was intrigued and grateful for having experienced this, I didn't think there was anything unusual about this. It was years later that I found out this couldn't have been any known species, as it was much too big, even to be an abnormally large specimen of a known species. The wingspan was at least 10 feet, probably around 12 feet. Its height was harder to ascertain because I didn't have a good reference point when it was perched up in the tree, but I would say it was around 5 feet tall. If I had known this was not a known species, I would have kept a tighter hold on the memory. Another detail I remember is that I think I saw the center, not the tip of its beak, amid all that fluff. If it was indeed the beak, then it had a yellow owl-like beak. Now, for a while I thought there must be a great forest behind that fence if there was such a big bird living there. But it turns out that it takes 1 minute to walk from the fence to some condominiums on the other side. I then tried to find the limb that fell and see if there were scratch marks on it. but I knew it would do little to prove anything. Discouraged, I went on Google Maps to find out what was in the direction it flew off to. I quickly found a place called Owl's Lair Cliff in Ragged Mountain State Park, which is in the exact direction it was heading. I was excited, but also realized that it has been so long and it probably never lived around here anyway, because I doubt there would be enough food to sustain it.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel, as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.